In recent weeks, Israel has dropped a missile, sent in its military troops, and clashed with Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. But now there is a ceasefire. How did a ceasefire agreement come about?
Well, first of all, I mean, it was tremendous pressure from around the world, people in the streets, for one, and also, from other nations because of the lopsided bombardment of the occupied forces of Israel versus, rock throwing Palestinians. And so there was pressure to, come to some kind of ceasefire in the situation.
Can you tell us who brokered the ceasefire?
Yes, the countries of Egypt and Qatar, and with Egypt being the main broker of this ceasefire, but they were the ones that did the negotiations to bring this about.
Your final call news article is entitled Middle East Ceasefire Reached, but for how long amid Palestinian suffering? Uh, Let me ask several questions that you pose in your article. The first being, how long will a ceasefire exist before attacks resume?
Yeah, the thing is that when we look at the whole history, 73 years of Israeli terrorism of the Palestinian people, and whenever there was some kind of breakage in the fighting over the course of the 73 years, the Israeli government always did something that resumed the fighting, that broke the peace, which was always a fragile peace. And so it's something that when you talk about ceasefires involving, again, the Zionist state of Israel, it can never be trusted.
Right. Now, there has been a lot of damage, families displaced, lots of just physical damage in that region. What do you think this means, the ceasefire? What do you think that means for the masses of Palestinians still suffering?
Well, the Palestinian people have suffered before this latest violence began, and they're suffering after. The Israelis, true to their history, bombed what you call civilian properties. I mean, they bombed residences where people lived, and there were people who were buried in that rubble that became their graveyard. You know, the Palestinian people will continue to suffer until the root problem of this illegal occupation of Palestine ends. How it will end, there's different things on the table. But until the root problem ends, the Palestinian people will forever suffer.
Now, over to the U.S. Was the international pressure and outrage against Israel a factor in the domestic push for President Joe Biden to stop an already approved sale of weapons to Israel?
Yes, in fact, there's a change, a shift going on in U.S. politics. You have more progressive Democrats, people like Bernie Sanders and others who have a different view of U.S. foreign policy. And so the pressure from around the world to come to some conclusion of this latest violence, it did help, because what as the article said, the deal was made before this started. But the question to the Biden administration is, does it really look good to the rest of the world, for your credibility to be selling arms, to let an arms deal go through while the Israelis are bombing innocent, poor Palestinian people? It just don't look good. And so they were trying to stop it. So yes, the pressure from around the world did help in that argument.
Now, we've supported, I will say, Israel for a long time. How much financial aid and military aid does the U.S. provide to Israel?
Nearly 4 billion. It comes to about 3.8 billion every year. E- um, uh, Israel is the number one, the highest recipient of U.S. foreign aid. Now, how does that translate to our listeners and to our watchers? This is your taxpayer money. You work for a living, your tax dollars go to support a welfare state. This country called Israel. So when you see the bombs dropping on innocent people, almost 300 people died, over 60 children died in this last 10 days alone. That's your money. You're paying for that. That's what this all means.
Protests have occurred outside of Israeli embassies and in various cities in the U.S. and across the world. Have the war crimes against Palestinians and the genocide of Blacks by the U.S. government and its police forced a shift in the consciousness and the unified world against colonialism?
Yeah, in fact, it has. And, those that I've been interviewing over the last couple of weeks dealing with Israel and this whole occupied Palestine issue, they have said as much, that there's a shift in the consciousness of the people. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that we are living at a time of intensified universal cry for justice. And you see the masses of people rising up against tyranny, rising up against oppression, rising up against their own governments that have been oppressing them and whatnot. And when George Floyd died last year, 1 year ago this week, you saw the level of uprise throughout the world. Well, that was a sign that there's something moving in the people. We believe it's the spirit of Allah moving in the people for this universal change that he's bringing about. And so, yes, there is a change going on. And this is why you see such support and you see camaraderie between people of the earth for each other's struggles.
Now, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, said a ceasefire is necessary, but will not alone achieve freedom, justice, and equality for all who live under Israel's apartheid government. Does this latest ceasefire end Israel's apartheid occupation of the Palestinians?
No, it doesn't end it at all. In fact, they're still there and they will continue to do what they're doing. They were given a green light under all of the administrations of the U.S. government, especially the last administration of Donald Trump, when he moved the embassy of America into Jerusalem. He recognized Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. When he made that move, he gave a green light to the very issues that brought about this last skirmish that we saw over the last 10 days. And that is not going to change. The root of the problem, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said, to solve issues, you must go to the root problem. The root problem was the usurping of Palestinian land by European Zionist Jews at the back end of the world community, then called the League of Nations, but now was the United Nations, when they gave the Palestinian land to these people. And it's been conflict, it's been unrest ever since. So that when they solve that root problem, then you will solve the problem of the Middle East, and you will solve the problem specifically of the Palestinian people and these usurpers of European Zionists who are now committing all atrocities of human rights and crimes against humanity.
Right. Now, very quickly, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan both warned that America will be forced out of the Middle East. Are these latest actions signaling a separation between America and Israel?
Well, it should be a signal, but the Biden administration really didn't want to do Israel like all other administrations. They had a pivot to China in that part of the world. So when this thing hit, that's why it was such a lackluster response at first from the Biden administration to lift its voice at what was going on, because he really did not want to deal with this. And they still don't want it. They don't have the real political will, but they're being forced to deal with it. Yes, America will be forced out of the Middle East. I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan tell one of our Palestinian brothers, who referred to that land as my people's land. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, no, brother, that land do not belong to the Palestinians or the Israelis. That land belongs to the righteous. So Allah is making moves to make this universal change in the world, where he's going to bring about and is bringing about a universal government of peace, when we all can live in peace together. That is the land that belongs to the righteous, and the rightful owners have yet to be there. But our day is coming. But America will be put out. And what does that mean for Israel? It means that Israel is in trouble, because Israel cannot stand on its own. Israel is a welfare state that stands on the nearly $4 billion a year that America gives it and its weapons. Outside of that, Israel has no stand. It has a nuclear weapon, yes, but Israel has no stand. Allah is going to overturn that whole situation, and he's doing it.
He's doing it. Thank you, Brother Brian, as always. And I hope to see you next week for some more on our Global Review Report.
Thank you.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. After the break, David Muhammad will be with us to tell us about his construction training company. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with NNVnews.com.